Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dabo Swinney, the Clemson Tigers, putting a bow on the spring practice window with their spring game Saturday afternoon. Now, the fellas hopped on immediately after and talked about some players that were generating some buzz, kind of some instant feedback that we got from this game. Want to take some time Monday afternoon and just from a bird's eye view, talk about where this Clemson team sits coming out of spring practice, going into summer workouts, going into fall camp. One, we're going to talk about some of the questions that we had going into spring that we got some answers to during spring practice. Want to talk about some potential question marks we still have that we might see Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers, try to address in the transfer portal. But I want to start with this, just a massive expression of gratitude to the Clemson fans, not only for rocking with the boys all spring long as we talked about the spring practice buzz, but the amount of Twitter DMs we got, the amount of emails that y'all sent us, the amount of feedback that y'all put in the comment section. I'm stuck up in Rochester, New York, was not able to watch the game. The amount of feedback that I got from that game, from y'all who were at the game and kind of dialed in, that stuff means the world to the boys. Appreciate you guys. It's the first Clemson spring game I wasn't able to watch in a very long time. It means the world. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. A lot more to talk about over the next couple of weeks, but we got to get dialed into the recruiting trail, potentially some transfer portal activity as well. I want to start here. Coming out of spring, and I've been very clear. I'm really high on this football team going into 2025. I practiced this in front of the mirror this morning. I want to get up in front of all of y'all and give you my elevator pitch about this Clemson team in 2025. Why to buy stock, why to believe in this Clemson football team going into 2025. And it starts with you have a quarterback returning that not only played like a five-star quarterback in the 2024 season, especially towards the end of the year, that game against Texas in the playoffs, Cade Klubnik has turned the corner, you might say, and was playing like an elite quarterback. Now he is top 3 in Heisman odds going into 2025. So you have a quarterback that's bona fide, one of, if not the best in the country, behind an offensive line that I think the world of Matt Luke, the position coach, but also an offensive line that, you're pretty much running it back with this unit, a ton of continuity, a ton of experience, a ton of guys that are going to be playing in the NFL over the next couple of years. So you're talking about a good quarterback, strong offensive line, reliable offensive line. Look, a lot of other teams coming out of spring have big-time question marks on the offensive line. They have a ton of guys that are new faces coming in through the transfer portal. This is an experienced group that's played together for a lot of years going into 2025. Oh, yeah, and to round it all off, you have arguably one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. And what a crazy statement to make. And some of y'all in the emails y'all sent were like, this Clemson wide receiver room reminds me of the wide receiver rooms we used to have. This was a position group for Clemson that's really struggled over the last couple of years before that 2024 season. It sounds like this is one of the best wide receiver rooms that Clemson has had in a really long time. You saw talk about TJ Moore, Brian Wesco, Antonio Willens. We knew what we had. The star of the show, Tristan Smith, is going to play significant amount for Clemson in 2025. You take all that into account, and you potentially have an answer at running back with a couple of names that are generating some buzz. How can you not buy stock in this Clemson offense? And then you look at the defense. And I know I'm running a little over my 2-minute elevator pitch, but just hang in there with me. You have a ton of top-end NFL talent. If you were to just count the names that will either be in the NFL draft next year, top 100 picks, or in the future will be top 100 picks, TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Will Hell. I'm not sure if DeMonte Capart's going to be a top 100 pick, but he's going to have a long NFL career. Amari Adams will be a top 100 draft pick once he gets a little bit older. Then you start looking at Sammy Brown, top 100 draft pick for sure. And you look at the back end, a guy like Avian Terrell, potentially Ashton Hampton, potentially a guy like Ricardo Jones that is really starting to come on. This is a Clemson defense that will get into some of the question marks we might still have from a depth standpoint. You got some serious top-end talent with one of the best DCs in the country coming in to run this unit. It's one of the most complete teams in all of college football. It has the top-end talent to win a national championship. There ain't no question mark about that. But what stands out to me is how complete it is. There are so many teams that we are, kind of following in spring practice that have glaring holes at certain position groups, whether it's an offensive tackle, whether it's in the back end, whether it's at linebacker. Where is the position that Clemson has a glaring need at? Because you can't, we thought it was going to be running back, but we're going to get into the running back room in just a second. Running back room transformed from 2 months ago. We were kind of just like not looking at it, hoping it was going to be okay. Room that I think we're all legitimately excited for going into 2025. That's my Clemson pitch. Want to get into some of the questions that we had that were answered, and let's start with the running back room. That again, going into spring practice, there just wasn't really a proven commodity, right? Phil Moffitt going to the NFL, you move Adam Randall, former wide receiver, to running back. You got a true freshman, Gideon Davidson, coming in, who we're all fired up about. David E. hasn't really played any significant snaps going into year two. There was not a running back that we looked at and said, hey, we know what we're getting here. It was spring practice. We were going to learn real quick if this was going to be a problem or not. Coming out of spring practice, coming out of the spring game, there's reason to be excited about a multitude of these backs. We talked about Adam Randall. I think the biggest thing for me is how they're using him out of the backfield. And then number two, he stayed healthy. My biggest concern about Adam Randall was, all right, is he going to be able to stay healthy at running back throughout spring practice? Because he's a guy that struggled to stay healthy at wide receiver. Well, he did stay healthy, and he looked pretty dang good at the running back position, especially out of the backfield, which Clemson seems like they're hell-bent on using him out of the backfield effectively, which we talked about it on Saturday. There ain't many linebackers that are going to be able to run with Adam Randall out of the backfield in terms of his pass-catching chops. Gideon Davidson, the name that we were most excited about, he looked the part as a true freshman. You have confidence that he's going to be able to contribute in the running back room. And then arguably the guy that we've been sleeping on all spring because he wasn't the top 50 national prospect, true freshman Gideon Davidson. He wasn't a wide receiver that's transformed into a running back. Those were kind of the two names that we gravitated to. David E. was arguably the most consistent and the most polished running back out of the group, and a guy that generated a lot of buzz out of spring. A lot of y'all were sending me some messages about David. All of a sudden, the question at running back is, do we have a name that we trust? All right, who's going to go win this job, and how good can this unit be? That excites me. That was the biggest question mark we had for Clemson going into spring ball, and it sounds like it got answered. Number two for me was, hey, replacing the tight end production that Jake Brinkenspool is leaving behind. Now, do we see a tight end really emerge to give the production that Jake did in the 2024 year and really the last couple of years? No, that's probably not the case. You guys know how excited I am about a guy like Christian Bentancur, but we're not sure if it's going to be in 2025. Here's my take, because I think he got more than enough wide receiver talent to replace the tight end production. Jake was an awesome tight end for Clemson. There's a reason he's going to go real high in the NFL draft and have a really successful career in the NFL, because he's a damn good tight end. I think part of the reason why he was so involved in the Clemson offense was we just didn't have that many good wide receivers. You might not have that NFL caliber tight end in the room this year, but you have it in the receiving room. So yes, it's going to be challenging to replace the production and the value that Jake brought. You got a lot of wide receivers that can replace that production. And I would argue that wouldn't be surprised if we see Clemson, lean into more 5-4 wide receiver sets, where it sounds like to me, let's not overcomplicate this thing. I know we traditionally play with a tight end. I want TJ Moore, Brian Wesco, Antonio Williams, and Tristan Smith all on the field at the same time. I think defenses will have a ton of problems dealing with that playmaking ability. Not to mention Cole Turner flashed. Not to mention Tyler Brown's coming back. I want these wide receivers on the field. I want as many wide receivers as we can get on the field, which is a stark different conversation than we had 2 years ago, where we just didn't even know if we had one dude. That's kind of what stands out to me on offense. Everything else, boxes are checked. Some buzz around the true freshman Chris Denson, who, hey, look, we covered it when he committed late. Late edition, didn't get a ton of media buzz. There are some things that it got to intrigue you about him coming from the state of Florida. Now, going over to the defensive side of the football, the main question we have, I believe, is there ain't no question mark about the talent, especially in the front seven. That first line of Clemson in the front seven is legitimately all NFL dudes. Are we deep enough? I got some conflicting reports. I heard that Vic Burley had a solid game. I heard that Amari Adams flashed at times. I think it's important to Point out Demonte Capers, I don't think played in this game. Peter Woods only played at drives to Filing Green working through an injury. So you didn't really get to see most of the guys that we expect to be the front line of this defense. I'm kind of going to trust my eyes in what I've heard about Amari Adams, and that is that he's going to play. He might not have the impact that Peter Woods had as a freshman, but I think he's going to be a rotational piece, and that's all we're looking for. Our bigger question is not the top end talent. We have that. Are we deep enough to win in January? Having Brown Schuler sounded like looked all right. Vic Burley was probably the most consistent that we've seen from him during his time at Clemson. I'm not saying that there's not room for improvement, but you probably like the trajectory and you like that he's finally healthy in this Clemson defense. And then a guy like Darian Mayo stepping up on the edge. His ceiling is ridiculously high. He wasn't as year one ready as a guy like TJ Parker. We knew he needed maybe a year, maybe two. He's going to be a really good football player for Clemson, and we'll see if he can be a good football player in the 2025 year. In the back end with Tavoy Fagan, who just announced he's hitting the portal, maybe there is some work to do in the two deep in the secondary for Clemson. That's probably the position that we're looking at and saying, hey, will Clemson look to add a body or two? But in terms of like you're starting 11 on each side of the football, I don't think you have a glaring hole. I think the question marks we have are the depth, not necessarily the talent. And then the biggest question mark, the running back spot, was answered. I don't think you need to go to the transfer portal and grab a running back, because what we saw in the spring game and what we've heard in spring practice, we feel good about that position. Clemson sits in a really, really good spot. There are a lot of teams that are going to go through spring practice, have multiple positions they have to address. Clemson's not really in that spot. Now it's just putting the cherry on top. And look, at my excitement for Clemson, even if they land 0 transfer portal additions, will remain the same. I don't think they need to go to the portal all that much. Maybe they'll go grab a cherry on top of the sundae, but we don't got to make the sundae. The sunday's already made. Now we're just worrying about that 1% better that's going to allow us to compete for a championship. But make no mistake about it, the team that we see on this paper right here, and I know my depth chart ain't exactly correct, to me, this is a team that's capable of winning a national championship. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys. That kind of puts a bow on spring practice. Now we're back dialed on the recruiting trail. Clemson got hot about a month ago. We got late May, that big visit weekend. Probably get hot again. A lot of commitments to break down. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.